Hey guys, hope you're doing well today. This week's episode is a very exciting one. Me and Brian are going to be getting into the next of our series on allegorical breakdowns. This time, getting into the rich, complex, and highly controversial film known as Joker. Coming up next. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Wizard Factory podcast, where you subscribe for weekly videos exploring deeper knowledge of the universe and yourself. My name is Logan Hart.
And I'm Brian Easterday.
And before we get started, hit that subscribe button for us if you're new here, and hit that like button. It's going to boost our videos and let more people get to see our content. So we really appreciate that. So this episode is a very interesting one. It's going to probably take a while, and we've been working on this idea for quite some time, but getting into an allegorical breakdown of the Joker film. This movie had mad success, and I think that there's a lot to be said about why this movie was so popular and what it's tapping into kind of on the macro level from a psychological standpoint, and getting into aspects of mental illness, the economy, things like that. Like, there's so much to get into here, and I'm very excited to breach into this awesome, amazing movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this was a really amazing film. Probably the best one I've seen in a really long time because it's absolutely rich and so much meaning. Not only from like just the content in the movie, but they did an amazing job with the cinematography and the music selection. I mean, if you pay, and this is a movie that the closer attention to detail you pay, the more you're going to get out of it, because there's a lot of things that are just it may be certain lyrics that are playing in a song in the background during a certain scene, or something written down somewhere that there's only a quick glimpse of it, that you just barely catch it, but it contains a lot of meaning and a lot of clues. So just a very, very well done movie, a beautiful piece of art for sure.
That's very true. This movie is so complex in detail, and I'm very excited to see how our notes are going to line up, and what things you noticed that I didn't, or vice versa. So me and Brian, we watched this movie in advance, obviously, and we took our own notes individually, but we haven't really talked about this yet. So this conversation is going to be very organic in real time. Also, those who've been following this series, the last and actually the debut element to this series was we breached into the Dark Crystal film, which we did in 3 parts. So I'm curious to you, the viewer, which would you prefer? This one, we're going to do everything in one sit down and release it as a bulk episode because we noticed that the views tend to be lower on those multi-part series. So we're just kind of trying to get it right and give you the best delivery that we can. So with that said, let's go ahead and get into it. We kind of begin at the beginning and move chronologically through it. So this opening scene, obviously very, very telling, very powerful, just setting the stage of the climate, the feel, the mood of the whole movie, and kind of bringing out some of those elements, those themes that are throughout as well. You see Arthur, the main character, who he's painting himself with clown makeup. That's his job. He holds a sign, advertises for a company, and he's getting ready to go do that. And it's just interesting because, first of all, he's painting his face on, and then he's contorting his face in all these different facial expressions and smiling, but you can tell like it doesn't match what he's really feeling. And to me, that was very symbolic of sort of, especially in his case, having such a very extreme mental illness. There's something you see written in his diary or his journal that I think is kind of applying here, of like, when you have mental illness, everyone expects you to pretend that you don't. So to me, this represents that mask that he's forced to wear just to go out into the world and like try to find his way. And then also in the background, you hear over the radio, they're talking about how the world is in disarray, the economy is collapsing, people are out of work, and things are just crazy. Everybody's losing their minds out there. And, you know, obviously, especially with the recent events, but just even in general, you can definitely see the parallels um,
Hmm.
in our world.
Yeah, they were talking about like a garbage strike there, and that's kind of one of the things that you see the city is just piling up with trash because the garbage union is on strike or whatever. So that kind of adds that like physical representation of what that city's psychological state is, that there's a lot of this garbage built up that no
Mhm.
one's wanting to take care of. And I think that's a really great way of setting the stage. And you know, something here too that I noticed with this movie is people either really really liked the movie or it really disturbed them and it made them
Mhm.
feel weird, but they couldn't quite place why. And I think it's because this movie is all about a certain archetype, and we'll, you know, one we've talked about on the show before, but you know, I'll get into that more later as we progress through the movie. But you know, there's definitely a certain kind of theme or energy about this movie.
Mhm.
But as Logan said in the first scene, you know, he's there, he's kind of holding the sign, you know, and he's dancing around doing his job, which is, you know, some like a really like piss poor job anyway. Like who would want to really dress like a clown and go out and, you know, hold the sign, you know what I mean? So it kind of just shows that he has this life that isn't so great. It's a very kind of lower class life. And then these kids run up and take his sign. So he starts chasing them into the alley where they kind of like ambush him, and they beat him up, and then you know break the sign to where you know he can't go back to work or whatever. And you see him that he's just like laying there in that alley hurt, and this alley is just piled up with garbage, you know, and he's just laying there crying, beat up. Like I thought, there's just such a great way of explaining like not only where the city kind of was at that point, but it is a very great way to introduce him as a character. Is this stage of setting up the foundation for him to step into the role of being this archetype that represents the chaos of society, because that's really what we see this character Arthur, you know, the character become throughout the whole movie as he steps more and more fully into this role of this archetype of the Joker. And you know, we'll get into what that represents. But you know, as you see these kids are chasing him, like he's yelling at people like, "Hey, stop them!" Like not a single person's helping him. Like everybody's just blowing him by. Like nobody cares that those kids robbed him or that they beat him up or anything like that. And again, it's really just showing that state of a society that's broken down and just has no care left.
Mhm. Very well said. Absolutely. And, you know, again, taking it back to sort of that economic crisis, you know, people are very much in this survival. You know, we just did the episode on the ego and how it's your survival brain. It's that left brain masculine, you know, and so when you're in a state of scarcity, you're shoved into that left brain modality and you're operating on that. And that's where you are very disconnected from your care. And then you see, you know, to me very symbolically that he's in this clown character, which is, you know, supposed to bring people joy. A clown is an entertainer that's goofy and makes you laugh and all that kind of thing. And you see he's just out there trying to do that, and he gets attacked for it. Like he wasn't bothering anybody, he was just trying to like make people smile, and they take, you know, they disrespect him and they beat him up and leave him just lying there in a heap, you know. And that really does set the stage for the theme of this whole movie of just like he was just trying to, you know, get by in the world, and the world is just so hostile, you know, when we allow fear to rule our minds in that turmoil and chaos that is constantly being orchestrated by the social engineers.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Um, yeah, you
So
know, so that is such a great way to set the stage, you know, like
mhm.
moving into that, you know, for sure.
And then the next scene, he's speaking with his therapist for the first time, you know, and
Mhm.
So she barely listens to him, and he like that. That's his only opportunity to even talk to someone, uh, and it's such this superficial. It's not like having a real friend that's there because they care. It's like she's there because it's her job, and she doesn't even like it. She's a typical bureaucrat, just like doing the bare minimum, just counting the hours till she can punch out for the day, and that's his space to actually try to talk about his feelings. I mean, how dismal is that, you know?
Yeah, yeah. What I like this scene as well, because what I had written down here was that the counselor doesn't give a shit. And that
Mhm.
really is, for anyone who's been through counseling, a lot of times that's the experience you'll get with a lot of kind of uh, standard psychologists and things or counselors, that they really don't care. It reminds me of a scene on another really great movie like Patch Adams, when he's first going through his kind of mental health thing, and he's doing the same thing. He's like, just he sees the counselor's not paying attention. He's paying attention to making his coffee, so he goes off on like this little rant, and he can tell the guy didn't hear a damn word he said. So there's this theme of these people who are, with Arthur, he's been beat down by society, has these issues, and he just needs someone to talk to. And the one person that's supposed to be there just doesn't give a shit. Because one of the things he says to her is just, he's just trying to even make a small talk. He's like, is it just me, or is it getting crazier out there?
Right.
It's like him checking in, like, am I the one crazy, or is it just really crazy out there?
Mm.
You know, and then he mentions to her that he's like pursuing a career in stand-up comedy, and you see her
Mhm.
facial reaction is just like, yeah, okay, like she just totally kind of just doesn't acknowledge him, kind of dismisses him.
Mhm.
um and you can see here, he she asked to see his notebook, which she asked him to keep, or a journal, in order to keep down like his mental health notes. And then he says, I've also been using it to write joke material, because I'm wanting to become a stand-up comedy. And you see her, flipping through it, and one of the jokes, one of the lines that you see here is, he just says, I just hope I just hope my death makes more sense than my life. And we'll get back to that here in a bit, because that notebook, you see it a few times throughout the movie where it flashes. And if you take the time to pause and read like the jokes and the things that are on there, it's very, very revealing of the psychological state that Arthur's going through, and kind of
Mhm.
how he's starting. You see that becoming the Joker wasn't just this light switch. It was a
Mhm.
very gradual process over a whole lifetime of just little thing after little thing adding and building up, to where a sick society created a sick man. You know,
Mhm.
so that, very excellent scene as a way of kind of showing that not only is he beat down, the world's harsh on him, but the one person that's supposed to be there to kind of help him, they just don't care at all.
Right. And then so the next scene is he's on the bus, and he's kind of making faces at the little kid in front of him, and the kid's laughing, and then the mom turns around and sees it, and she's like, leave my son alone. And to him, he's shocked because he's not bothering him, he's making him laugh. Like you'd think a parent would like that. But then it sends him into a fit where the first time you see him have one of his laughing fits where he literally can't control himself. And he hands her the card that says, I have a condition that's caused
Mm-hmm.
from a head trauma or some kind of, emotional illness or something like that, which I think, will come into play later as well.
Right.
But even in his life where he's not wearing his makeup, he wants to connect with people. Especially a child, I think is very symbolic because kids are so open. They don't see a crazy person, they just see a man that's funny, right? They don't
Mm-hmm.
have the same kind of preconceived judgments.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that I thought that was a really interesting scene, because I mean, you see the woman, like, when she says it, she doesn't even ask politely. She's honestly just kind of a real cunt about it. She's like, stop bothering my kid. And
Yeah.
like when I saw that movie, I was like, man, like, damn, like that is like just extremely like rude. Like, as a parent myself, like if I'm at the store in line or something, and someone's making faces at my kid and he's laughing, I'm not gonna care. Like, you're just gonna laugh at it. They're just a kid enjoying themselves. But you see that this woman, that she's just awful, like you see that, Arthur says that later on in the movie. He's like, people are just awful now, Like,
Mm,
you know, he was just trying to have a human connection. He was just trying to make a kid laugh, something so innocent. And yet he gets that kind of a response from that woman for no reason at all.
right.
And you see it triggers that mental health. So that's, again, very symbolic of it's just this one little punch after another that this guy just keeps getting beat down by society, and all he wants to do is be a normal human being. Like, that's all he's ever trying to do.
Right. So then you see Arthur walking up this very iconic staircase for the first time, and you see this staircase several times in the movie. And this time, everything has a very vibrant, deep blue color to it, and the music is very like kind of like brooding and sad and just kind of wailing. And he's walking up trudging up this very long staircase. So again, very allegorical of just the weight, the gravity that's constantly pulling on him as he's trudging through his life. You know, at this beginning stage of the film, this is, you know, again, it's kind of like laying that all out of the energetic climate of the beginning of this progression of Arthur.
I'm glad that you picked up on that as well, that he's ascending that same staircase that's so important in that a really prominent scene, you know, probably one of the most important scenes in the movie later,
Mm-hmm.
but, you know, where he's descending it then, but here he's ascending it. And he's also ascending it after leaving that, you know, so he had the meeting with the psychologist where like they don't really care. You know, he asked her to up his meds. Uh, you know, the lady on the bus was rude to him. So then he's just trudging home, like you said. And what's he carrying as he's carrying up the staircase? He's carrying his bag of meds.
His
You know, so
baggage.
very much it's that burden of that mental illness that he's just
Mm-hmm.
trying to climb. And you can see these stairs in this movie. For me, were very symbolic of uh, the difference between the conscious and, you know, the subconscious and the unconscious mind. It's kind of like this path that he's like going, you know, before, you know, like, so he's coming from the state of being very sad and a very down place of dealing with all this unconscious trauma, and he's just trying to walk on with life. He's just trying to get to the top, you know.
Ascends, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You know, so those stairs, pay very close attention to those as you're watching this movie, because
Mm-hmm.
they're very important.
Right. The next scene is actually transition. Before he gets up to his apartment, you see the floor in his apartment building is checkerboard as well, which that's another theme that I'm going to mention a couple of times in this. So he lives in the checkerboard. You know, he resides there. And then he goes up to his mother's apartment where he lives, and his mom and him have this conversation about Thomas Wayne, who is, you know, in this universe, I mean, obviously there's parallels, but it's not like 100% like DC comic Batman. But Thomas Wayne is a very prolific philanthropist, billionaire, the father of Bruce Wayne. And his mom says he's the only one who can save the city.
Mm-hmm.
And I just thought that was very indicative of the typical mindset of the pacified person who is just trained to abdicate all personal responsibility towards better men, the suits, whatever. And, you know, and again, that savior complex of just like, he's the only one who can save us, you know, like
Mm-hmm.
pray to the sky daddy kind of thing. Did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, definitely. Because one of the first things right before she talks about Thomas, the first thing that she asked him, have any letters come today? You know, did he write back? She's been writing Thomas Wayne
Right.
for decades now,
Mm-hmm.
because she is under the delusion, you know, that him and her at one time had a relationship because she had worked there. So this scene is really, it's introducing his mother and the fact that she's mentally delusional. You don't quite find that out yet. I mean, you can kind of tell by how she acts, you know. And then she, of course, you know, then mentions that, you know, that, oh, you know, Thomas, he's the only one that can save this city. You know,
Mm-hmm.
so it's very interesting. A person that is very mentally ill is also stuck in the need for having a savior. It
Right.
shows, you know, that like, you know, even if we see that in monotheism, that need for savior, that outside source to take care of you, like that is an indication of a mental illness,
That's a very good
an
point.
unhealthy mind. you know.
because
Um,
she's not only clinging to him to save the city, but she's also writing him letters to save her family, to let him
yes,
bail her out. So it's a double layer there.
right. And she also, says to Arthur, like, you need to, like, you look skinny, which you see, and this is one thing I have to give the actor credit for. You see the state that he put his body into for this
Yeah.
role. I mean, it was like there's a point where you see him with his shirt off, and he looks like someone from
Grotesque.
Auschwitz. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
he just is just nothing but bones. And you find out. I don't want to give it away yet, but you find out later in the movie why he's in that state. So the fact that his mother of all people was telling him, "Oh, you look skinny," when she's kind of at a root cause of why that is, and like I said, we'll get into that later. I think is very interesting, and again, it's an indication of how disconnected from her own reality she really is, because
Hmm.
she doesn't even realize what she's doing, or why he is that way.
So then they sit down to watch the Murray Show, which this is the first time you're seeing this character played by Robert De Niro, who I think did a very good job as well. And again, it's very typical of the American home where you get home from work and you have a quick conversation and then boom, you're phasing out to the boob tube. In this case, a late night talk show host. So he has this daydream that he's there at the show, and then he gets heard in the audience, and Murray's speaking directly to him and asking him questions, and he gets to talk about himself, and he says that I take good care of my mother, and everyone applauds, and it's showing what he would daydream about is he's imagining the things that he wants as a human being. He wants to be recognized for the way he cares for his mother. He doesn't get proper thanks even from her, much less anyone else. So it makes sense that he would daydream about getting those accolades that he's not actually getting,
Mhm.
but craving in his real life.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Because he talks about, he's had to be the man of the house for a long time, ever since
Mm-hmm.
his father died. And then in his imagination, Murray says that, oh, I understand what that's like, and that's why he brings him upstage, and he gets this, this embrace from him, this hug from a person that he could see as a fatherly
A
figure.
father figure, exactly.
Someone relating to him, that he was just wanting to that recognition, that that's
Right.
not what he had, so he was seeking that out. So he didn't have that chance for the childhood.
Mm-hmm.
um
He said, "There's something special about you," which it makes sense. He wants to feel special. He wants to feel valuable.
right. Hmm. Yeah. So
And
and I think that it's very interesting that he imagines this. It's the
mhm.
first little hint that you actually start to see of his more serious
Delu-
kind of mental illness, of the
right.
delusional kind of schizophrenia, that a lot of times he'll pop in and out of different realities, or different scenes in his head, not knowing which one is real or not.
Right, because the first time I watched the movie, you don't really know what's real and what's not until you've seen the
Right.
whole thing, and then you can kind of deduce it. So it's good that I watched the movie once just in its pure experience, and then went back, watched it again to take the notes, because then I could see
Yeah.
the whole arc story, as it went. Yeah, and then of course, then he says, I'd give it all up to have a kid like you." So again, very much tapping into that fatherly, just wants to be loved and appreciated.
Yeah.
So
Hmm. The next little thing I have here is just, it was kind of like 15 minutes into the movie or so, they kind of show him changing, and you see the state of his body. Like
mhm.
we were just talking about, to where it's just absolutely ran down. He's just nothing but skin and bones, and his posture's terrible. Like, he's slouched over, like he just
Yeah,
kind of
he's
looks like this golem like creature almost.
uh
And it's very, there's a lot of law of correspondence in this movie. That's a huge theme. Like, if you want to understand this movie, understand the law of correspondence, because that's very, his physical state is very reflective of his psychological state as well. That he's just beaten down and broken and down to just the bare bones. That there's not much life left in him.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good observation too. Yeah, he looks almost like a contortionist or something. Like there's something
Hmm.
just
Yeah.
very unnatural about him. Yeah, he was like wrenching on the laces of his boots and the leathers all creaking and stuff. Very
Hmm.
visceral scene. And then you
Yeah.
see, Arthur is getting shit from his boss, like, again, just like you said earlier, punch after punch. That's a great way to describe what's
Hmm.
happening here. Is just like when he's already down, and like it's like kicking a wounded puppy. I mean, it's just brutal. And at this point, he has this. He literally got beat up for his job, and then he's getting blamed and taking the price out of his paycheck for the sign that got stolen from him. I mean, it's the
Yeah, it got
epitome.
broken on his face. Like,
Yeah,
they broke it on his face to where it wasn't even good anymore. And then his bosses go to charge him for it. Like, it's just,
yeah. I
you
mean,
feel
he
really bad for
basically
the guy.
he
Like,
basically gaslights him because he's like, they
mhm.
stole the sign, and he's like, come on, who steals a sign? Like he basically said, you're full of shit. I don't buy it. And so, yeah, like it basically adding insult to injury. And
Mhm.
at this point, you see Arthur kind of in the alley taking his aggression out on a dumpster. And this is the first time you get to see, like, you can see it's starting to already leak out. That violence, that rage is already starting to leak out. This time it was a dumpster, but as you see, it doesn't stay there, and even the way he did that. I mean, I'm surprised that the actor Joaquin Phoenix didn't hurt himself the way he was kicking
Yeah.
it out of a metal dumpster like that. I mean, wow.
Yeah, I mean,
That's
yeah, like
brutal.
you've got to give him props. Like he fucking nailed this role more than I think any other actor has. I mean, he really did an amazing job in it. You know, so one of the things we can see in another scene here is that after his boss gives him shit, he's talking to one of his other coworkers, and they're talking to him like, hey, we heard about what happened and that you got beat up, and one of them says, you need to protect yourself, Arthur. And he gives him this 38, this gun that becomes so prominent throughout the rest of the movie that this was really like, yeah, it's like Arthur was the ammo, like the mental
Mm-hmm.
illness, like the tendency to snap was there. All that energy was built up, and then all of a sudden he's given the tool that is the medium that he can express that through.
Mm-hmm.
So you see he's given this gun that, at first he's like, oh, I can't have this, and the guy tells him like, no, you need to have it. So then he keeps it. um
Well, yeah, I mean, that theme kind of comes up again later, but that's really all you see at this point, is that he gives him a gun.
right.
I mean, I guess you could look at it like the whole, like, well, he's not legally supposed to have a gun, right? But
Mm-hmm.
it just goes to show that the law didn't stop it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, more stricter gun laws wouldn't have stopped what happened. He just was given a gun by some guy that didn't really care. I mean, it is interesting to see that playing out in a real life scenario that could happen, because obviously no legislation would have stopped that from happening.
Right. Yeah, so he gets this, and then his boss gives him all the shit. So then he leaves the office, and you see him climbing these same stairs again. So it's just more of this same drudgery every day
Yeah.
that he's got. He's just dealing with it, and it's piling up, and every day that load going up those stairs is getting
Mm-hmm.
heavier. But then in the next scene, he's in the elevator, and this lady hollers at him like, hey, hold that elevator. And it's one of his neighbors at his apartment. you know uh and in the elevator, she kind of has a brief, like, says a brief thing to him, and makes like a symbol of like, oh, like, life is stressful, like, I just want to blow my brains out or whatever. But of course, him being mentally ill, that was something that he just really, he could relate to that. And it was a
Mm-hmm.
human being that was actually nice to him. Like,
Mm-hmm.
so far you've seen the movie, like, this is really probably one of the only people that's actually nice to him. uh you know so that kind of starts something here, which is plays into a much bigger role as we, this character that he meets, his neighbor, develops into a lot bigger of a theme as the movie goes on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is interesting that he sort of latched on to that pantomime, because
Mhm.
people do that very tongue in cheek. It's an expression, but to him, like, it meant something a little bit different. That's why he kind of awkwardly. I mean, they were already walking their separate ways, and he called her name, turned around, and he went, and she's like, okay, like,
Yeah,
cool.
Right.
very socially awkward.
Right. Yeah. So then in the next scene, he's back at home then, and he's giving his mother a bath. So he's a mentally ill guy, and he's taking care of his mother, who's probably even more delusional. Um, and she keeps asking about those letters, and then he's talking to his mom, and he's telling his mom on how he's been working on his stand-up comedy, and his mother says, "How are you going to do that? I mean, don't you have to be funny for that?" Like, so he tries to express his dream to like his mother, who he's taking care of, that like if he wasn't there, she would just die, pretty much. And then he's telling her his dream, and then she not talks about, well, how are you going to do that? Don't you have to be funny for that? In other words, like he's not funny. He's just sad. He's just Arthur. He can't accomplish what he wants.
Mhm.
So there's this very kind of interesting thing that, because his mother in this movie is a very, very interesting character to look at, in the sense that not only is she a root, you find out later she's a root cause of a lot of his issues and things, but as far as antagonizing the wound and keeping it going and never allowing the man to get to a point that he could ever even begin to heal, she is
Mhm.
very, very prominent in that. You kind of realize that his whole life has been controlled by this delusional woman. So then to
Mhm.
have this one person tear him down like that, that's just another extremely hard blow of a guy wanting to connect with human beings, and then every person that's supposed to care about him just tears him down more. You kind of see him after he gives his mother that bath. You see him sitting in the house, and he's playing with the gun, and like
Oh yeah.
pretending, with it, and that it's really kind of setting that stage that he now has this. He's thinking about it now.
I'm glad you brought that up, because what you see is he's really sensing the power of that gun, because
Hmm.
he's kind of pretending this little role play where he's talking to the neighbor girl, and he's dancing. So just having that in his hand gives him like this extra hubris boost, and he's all like, he's like doing this creepy rib poking out dance like this, and she's like, he's emulating her voice, like, "You're a really good dancer," and he's like, "I know," and he's like, "Who's not though? Him." And he like that. The scene really cracks me up because it's just so kind of like very childish, and then he
Yeah.
accidentally shoots the gun when he does that, and he like freaks out, and his mom is like, "What was that?" And he turns the TV up real loud and everything. But yeah, that's what it says to me, is he's already feeling the power that he holds in his hand, and it's
Hmm.
giving him that boost of like not being so worried about what other people might do to him or how they might treat him, because he's holding that. The very next scene, you see he's in a comedy club taking notes. He's in the very back of the room, and the guy's pretty funny actually. I remember, the jokes being very good, and you hear people laughing, and as the camera's panning back where he is, he's like laughing at all the wrong times. Like when there's no punchline, you hear him do the Joker laugh. So there's two different laughs that he does, and I'm curious what your thoughts are on this, but when he does the Joker laugh, which is, it's almost like that carnival sounding, uh, is when he's feigning a laugh when it's a social situation, when somebody else is being funny or telling a joke. He does that
Hmm.
laugh, and it's very odd and non-authentic seeming. It seems very like kind of strangely,
Forced.
yeah, forced, fake. But then his other laugh is the one that is his tick that he can't control, and that one is like an uncontrollable burst of authentic laughter. But it's always when something's really ugly, like when he's feeling uncomfortable emotions, or someone's like,
Hmm.
giving him shit, or about to attack him or something, like that sort of thing. So it's almost like the wires got completely crossed in his brain, where his real laugh happens when he's uncomfortable, and then his Joker laugh is when he's just trying to appear normal, like, and just
Hmm.
laugh because other people are laughing.
Absolutely. And then, yeah, like I said, and then he goes into the comedy club, and you see him taking these notes. Like Logan said, his timing off from others, and this comedian, he's pretty funny, and you see one of like Arthur's taking notes, just trying to learn, like, and the guy tells some joke about like sex or whatever. So then you see Arthur write, sexy jokes are always funny.
Yeah.
So you see him, he's really trying to figure out how to be a normal person, how to be a funny person. He
Mhm.
just doesn't quite know how. He doesn't quite get it. Um, you know, but then you can see that they flash to this notebook, and you can see a lot of the things written down in it. And Logan mentioned one of these earlier. One of the things you can see is the worst part about mental illness is people expect you to behave as if you don't, and don't has like a little smiley face in the O. Even the way
Mhm.
it's written, like you see his writing, his penmanship is extremely poor. His spelling, he doesn't spell things correctly.
Dyslexia,
Yeah, exactly. He's
learning
very
disabilities, probably.
right. You can tell there's some kind of a damage there. Um, so yeah, as you read through a lot of these jokes, you can kind of see, and we'll put up a screenshot here for everybody that you can kind of see them. But you just pause the video here and read what some of those are, because again, it's really setting up his mindset, and you see the kind of style of humor that he's starting to develop. It's this hint of the Joker starting to rise to the surface, because he's starting to have these slips, these breaks with reality, where the mental illness is just, he can't contain it anymore. And then this archetype of the Joker is being created and formed and starting to show itself.
Hmm. Yeah. So the very next scene is where he's at the hospital
Mm-hmm.
dancing for the kids, and he's again, oh, he actually looks like Patch Adams in this one. He's in the hospital with
Yeah,
all the cancer
yeah, the
kids,
big red.
and he freaking drops his gun on the floor, and like, dude, that scene is just like, it's hard to watch, because it's, imagine what that would be like. And the nurse is absolutely petrified. She's like, and the kids are kind of like laughing, because he sort of like goes like this, and the
Yeah,
kids
like
are like, but, and then right after that, you see he's in a phone booth, basically getting reamed and getting fired. He's like, who the fuck brings a gun to a kid's hospital? You know what I mean? Like, seriously, I
mhm.
mean, it's a valid question. But
So yeah, on the phone booth one, you see that here his boss tells him, he's like, Randall, the guy who had given him the gun earlier, Randall told me you tried to buy a 38 off him last week. So then he
mhm,
finds out the guy that insisted on him taking the gun actually just lied to his boss, which made him get fired. And one of the things he tells his boss as an excuse is, he's like, it's just part of my act now, which I
mhm,
think is very interesting, because it was a lie to try to cover it up. But as you go through the movie, that gun actually does eventually become part of his act. So that lie ends up actually becoming true throughout the movie, because of
mhm.
all the charge built up in this scene here. So I think it's
Damn.
definitely very interesting to note that.
Yeah, that's a good one, because I mean, think about it, kind of going back to the theme that I mentioned in the very first scene. He's painting his makeup on. His
Mm-hmm.
act is the act of being normal. That's the double play of this
Yep.
symbolism throughout the movie, is the act of him as a clown, the Joker, and the other is the act of trying to be normal, trying to appear as if he's not broken and damaged.
Mm-hmm.
Very
Yeah.
interesting, yeah. Um, and then to close that scene up, he rams his head through the glass pane in the in the phone booth.
Mm-hmm.
So again, you see he's getting more and more violent,
Yeah.
and that's building. So this kind of, to me, signifies the final straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak. Getting fired after that, and then this segues very, very well into the very next scene, which is very much a turning point of this movie. So he's on the subway, and these Wall Street guys, these kind of young, hotshot looking, well dressed, wearing suits and ties, dudes come in onto the subway, and they're immediately just being that stereotypical douche, like bragging and talking shit, and like sort of pestering the lady. There was like the lady next
Yeah.
to
They're
him
like
for
throwing food at her and shit. Like, yeah, just terrible
just
behavior.
anyone within their immediate vicinity. Like, it would have been Arthur if he had been sitting closer, but then he gets
Mm-hmm.
her attention later, because he starts laughing uncontrollably. and so they sort of divert their attention from those people to him, and in like, what is it? He's singing this song as he's
Where
approaching.
are the clowns? That's one of the things I picked up on is when he's singing the
Mhm.
song, he's like, "Where are the clowns?" Like, he's like,
Right, which now that I'm thinking of that, that really kind of does play in, especially at the towards the end of the movie,
mm-hmm,
where Arthur isn't the only clown who's sort of stepped into
yeah,
that archetype, and we'll get into that more later. But yeah, so
mm-hmm,
he's being antagonized by these guys, and you see like he's even trying to get his card to explain, like to give him to show him his condition or whatever. He doesn't even care. He like knocks it out of his hand, and and already starts to physically assault him. So
mm-hmm,
things are just escalating at this point, but it's still extremely shocking when all of a sudden you hear the gunshot ring out and blood splatters, and like it feels so real when you're watching it. Like you almost feel that sick feeling like you just saw
yeah,
somebody just get, shot in the face. It's intense for sure.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's funny that that guy was singing not only that song, and if you pay attention to the lyrics of that song, that's one throughout this movie. Anytime there's music in the background, pay attention very closely to what those lyrics are saying because they're spot on with their movie selection in this. Um, and later on, Arthur makes a joke about that, which I'll we'll tell it later, towards the end of the movie, and kind of like this final climatic scene. He kind of makes a joke about their singing, but we'll save that for later. Um, but when they're beating him up and all this, and you see these kind of the lights flashing on and off, and then so it's this kind of very chaotic scene, and then they're screaming at him. They're saying, "Stay down, freak." Which, if you think about that, it's very symbolic because you find out that these just little punk suits that they worked for Wayne Enterprises of all places. So there are these kind of Wall Street guys, these very rich guys that are always looking down on everybody and just treating the poor people like the lower class for their entertainment, like they're animals. And then they're telling him, stay down, freak. So not only on if you look at that on the microcosm, like, yeah, they're beating him down as an individual. But if you were to scale that up to like the macrocosm, you can see that it's this theme that you see throughout the movie of the rich constantly beating down on the poor and the lower class. Stay down, freaks. Stay where you belong.
Mhm.
And then what happens? He finally pulls that gun out and then he shoots him. And that's where this is a major turning point in the movie. All of a sudden, because he realizes people will notice him.
Mhm.
He can actually have an effect on the world and a
Mhm.
powerful one. He can shake and stir up a whole city, which is what
Right.
this event really does. It really sets off major events and kind of riots within the city because it's such a kind of archetypal expression of what was going on psychologically as a whole.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, you can see the way he acted that so much that you can tell he was in a trance for a while, and you can see the moment when he kind of comes out of it. But I mean, until the last guy is killed, because he wounds him, and then he
Mm-hmm.
manages to get off the train, and he's like literally chasing him down, pointing the gun like this and trying to catch up to him, and then guns him down and completely unloads the pistol on him. And then
Mm-hmm.
he starts running. I mean, just sprinting, and he ends up in a bathroom, and then he slams the door and he locks it, and he's kind of like with his hands on the wall. And I think that's when he finally came back to Arthur and not the
Mm-hmm.
beast, the werewolf, which we get into later. Um,
Yeah, I'm
and,
glad
and
you picked
and
up on that
that's
too.
yeah, that's where he kind of comes back to himself, and he kind of realizes what he had just done. And to me, what struck me was that's probably the first time he's felt powerful in his entire life, like
Mm-hmm.
actually powerful.
Yeah, yeah. He says later on in the movie that he's like, yeah, whenever he's confessing to killing the guys, he's like, it felt good, and I'm sick of pretending that it didn't.
Mm-hmm.
Like, but it's interesting to note here that he killed in self defense first. Like, he didn't just snap and go kill those guys for no reason. Like, they were being really extremely rude to a woman first, and
Mm-hmm.
then they were like beating the shit out of him. Like, so he killed them in self-defense. Like, the fuckers got what they deserve, which is
Mhm.
a theme throughout this movie. Uh, but
Literally.
I do think it's interesting to know that it's not that he wanted to become this. It was something that he was pushed into. It's just all these little prods that society had been giving this man throughout as his life, and as it develops, it eventually gets to this snapping point, and then he ends up in this
No,
bathroom. Go ahead.
well, it's interesting though. It kind of dawned on me that when you're hearing the reports and the after effects of this murder, they're telling the story of these three young men that worked for Wayne
Mm-hmm.
Enterprises. They're being portrayed as the victims. There was no
Yep.
talk of an altercation where they were assaulting a man and he defended himself. It was just like this cold-blooded murder on the subway. And that's very
Yeah.
interesting because it's very kind of reminiscent of the gaslighted version of news and things that we get from the institutions.
Right.
But
Absolutely.
you were
Yeah. And
getting into
and
the
then
bathroom scene.
right. Yeah. Because in this bathroom, and I think this bathroom is a very interesting to look, like the location. It's this very rundown, very trashy bathroom. But if you think about it, the bathroom is like the place for people. Like, that's where they're really private. They can be alone with their own thoughts. That's where they can really relax or whatever. So you see him, he runs into this bathroom, and as you said, this is the first time he's ever really been it's like he's seeing his true self come out, in the sense that he isn't so powerless, that he can, werewolf and create this kind of shock. And he's looking at himself in the mirror, and then you see him start to like laugh, and kind of, it's the first steps of it, embracing and stepping into that insanity of
Mm-hmm.
really accepting becoming that role of the archetype of the Joker,
Mm-hmm.
that we see here. He gets the taste of it, and you can see he starts to dance. He starts to feel and fall in love with that kind of, that craziness. It's that
Mm-hmm.
embracing of it, rather than just feeling like he's been put down all the time.
Right. I mean, definitely you could relate this to the Christian mindset or the Abrahamic mindset, whichever, of, this light being versus the animalistic self that's supposed to be just completely eradicated or separated, disconnected from. Whereas, first of all, that's impossible. It's all a part of you. But second of all, it has a very specific and important role to play. Again, taking it back to our recent episode on the ego, it's that beast that wants to rage out, it for a fierce but just cause. You know, Arthur was being pushed and pushed. His boundaries were being violated again and again. And basically, what happened was he threw he threw Mjolnir down. He threw the hammer down,
Mm-hmm.
to invoke the boundaries, because he was being assaulted, and it was
Mm-hmm.
very explosive, and people died. And I mean, yes, that was an extreme reaction, but it's a cause and effect type of thing. He's the effect of all this sick society being concentrated at the downtrodden, and and directing all of that toxic energy into a person. And before we move on, I wanted to say a couple more things about this bathroom scene, because first of all, once he sort of realizes what he did, and sort of it sets in, like it clicks in his brain, he just sort of like very naturally goes into this dance. And it's actually a very beautiful dance. It's very slow and just kind of like, you know, it's like he's feeling the magic of being inside of a human body and having control over our form. But also, it's interesting to note that he's doing that dance again on a checkered floor. You literally see his toe sliding across that checkered floor. I think is actually very
Mm-hmm.
symbolic, because he's dancing on that base consciousness. Base relates to beast. It's that werewolf, that beast that, like I said, is going to rage out when it gets provoked again and again. Nature has that fierceness to it, and
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of what we're seeing. And also, there's very distinct orange lighting in this bathroom, which symbolically represents mental illness as well as MK Ultra. That's why the movie Clockwork Orange is very much about MK Ultra, and it has those strong orange themes. Um, and he's wearing an orange vest as well. Um, and one thing that I kind of thought I'd be curious to see what your thoughts are actually is, to me, it's kind of like depicting this freedom from natural law in a way. So he's doing this dance, which is a very free flowing dance, but he's just sort of like gone over the edge in terms of like negative morality. And, you know, by way of murder, it's kind of like this false awakening. You know, he's realizing his power, but through violence rather than wisdom and self-mastery. It's like a dark initiation of sorts.
Yeah, yeah, I guess we could look at it that way. Um, but I would see the dance more of like him kind of recognizing and stepping into that role of cause and effect, like realizing that he can have an effect, that he's not just totally powerless, and it's
Hmm. Almost like he's dancing
is
with
more
reality.
of an
It's the
right,
back and forth.
right. So I see it kind of almost as an embracing of that, even though it's from a kind of darker perspective, you could say.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but after that, you know, you see the scene where he goes, all of a sudden he has this like new charisma or this new confidence,
Mm-hmm.
and this scene later you'll see actually isn't real or doesn't really happen. But in the scene, he rushes back to his apartment and he goes and knocks on that lady's door and just very confidently like kisses her out of nowhere, and you know, and then they go in the apartment. Um, so that's also, you see that this event was also very, had a lot to do with him actually snapping, that the delusions are actually becoming more grand now and harder to actually separate between those and what's really going on.
Mm. Yeah. And then you know, he's interacting with his old coworkers and that sort of thing. And again, he's very uh, kind of blasé and just kind of brushing. They're kind of trying to heckle him and stuff, and he's just kind of brushing it off. And then he goes, "Oh yeah, I forgot to punch out," and he like beats the clock off the wall, which it's still kind of deranged behavior, but to him, he's just being funny. He's finally uninhibited in stepping into that role of a comedian that he wants to identify with. It's like this brand newfound inhibition and liberation. Um, he's found his self-worth by actually taking that act and standing up for himself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, I love. Yeah, personally, I thought it was a hilarious joke when I was watching the movie. It made me laugh. Like,
Yeah.
oh no, I forgot to punch out, and he punches. It's funny as fuck. So you see him stepping into this more and more and becoming this role, this Joker, that he's this archetype that, even though he's sick, but he's reflecting the dark side of society with comedy, which,
Mm-hmm.
you know, we've talked about on the show. Comedy is an extremely useful tool for being able to reflect the unconscious mind of society and the darker things. So
Mm-hmm.
that, you know, the Joker's an excellent archetype representing that. But then after he does that, he's descending down the stairway, leaving work or whatever, and you see him grab some spray paint out of his bag, and there's a sign that says, "Don't forget to smile," and he crossed out, you know, "forget to." So he made it just "don't smile," you know, and then he, you know, like taps that sign, you know, and then just kind of keeps descending down the stairs. So again, this kind of theme of going from the conscious mind, now he's delving into the subconscious and the
Mm.
unconscious, diving deeper into this insanity. And when it gets to the bottom, he like kicks open the door and you see this kind of bright flash of sunlight, and it's
Mm-hmm.
like that he's descended into the unconscious and then boom, kick the door open. So the
Wow.
unconscious mind, the trauma, is now in the light. It's now that archetype is risen. It's in the surface now to where people can start to see it.
That's good. I like that.
So in the next scene, you know, he comes home and then they're listening to the news, and he finds out that the three men that he killed worked for Wayne Enterprises. So there's again this strong connection with the Wayne Industries, which fits, obviously plays into that backstory of how the Joker and Batman, the Wayne Enterprises really are tied. So their stories are interwoven so much.
Mm-hmm.
But then Thomas Wayne is on the show, and he's giving. He's giving commentary on this, and Wayne says, he calls him a coward. He says, only a coward would wear a mask to kill, three innocent men or whatever. But there's this theme that, not only is he insulted by Thomas, which in growing up, his mom has just made this guy out to be God. He's the only one that can save us, kind of thing. So now he's insulted personally by the guy. And then the guy says, you're having a mask. So this theme of, because you're wearing a mask, that you're a coward, when really we can see that he would feel more like it's society that's really wearing the mask. Like the Joker, even though his face is painted, has a more real face than the rest of society, as we see through that, because he stops being fake. He steps into a place of being authentic. But then something else that Wayne says here, he says, those of us who have made something of our lives will always look at those who haven't as clowns. And that statement not only resonates with Arthur and like puts a seed very, very deeply. It's like, oh, you're only going to look at me as a clown, just wearing the mask. But the rest of the city takes it as an insult, because Wayne's just saying that, oh, those of us who have made it are always going to look down at the rest of you as clowns, as jokes. It's very much that dark occultist mindset. So you see that, and that statement sets off the city, and that's where everybody starts protesting and rioting. And what do they wear? They start wearing the clown mask. So that was a very interesting scene in the sense that, he thought he was going to make a statement that was going to be very impactful, and it was, but not in the way that he expected it. That it ultimately backfired on him in a very chaotic way. Okay, so then the next scene, he's back in his therapist's office, and again he's talking, and she's not really listening, and he says, I didn't even know if I existed. And then he sees that she's not paying attention, and she's saying something else, and he just cuts her off, and he's like, I don't think you ever really listen. He's like, all I have are negative thoughts. What I said was, my whole life I didn't even know if I existed, but I do, and people are starting to notice. So he's hinting at that, yes, he killed these men. It's in the paper. It's the whole city's talking about it. The whole city's rioting because of it. People are starting to notice. So he knows that he exists because he can have an act that has an effect on reality that he can observe. So, he went from a state of not even knowing whether he existed to then knowing that he does, and other people can see him. So that's he's stepping into this power that he sees that there's something here I can embrace more. And then, the counselor pretty much blows him off. She tells him, well, the city's cutting the funding, or the state's cutting the funding, whatever government is paying for it. So he's not going to have access to the sessions anymore. That'd be his last session. He asked about his meds, and she's like, pretty much he gets told not only does he not have a counselor now, he doesn't have access to his medication. No one's going to fund anything like that. And she says, they don't give a shit about people like you, or me for that matter. So again, that, this society that just doesn't care, that just keeps pushing this man down. This man's already struggling with mental health issues, and then he's told that, well, there's no more medication. So then the next scene, it leads into him at the comedy club, where he goes up and he just totally bombs. He just starts laughing at the mic because he gets nervous and he gets triggered out. So then people just really kind of rip on him. But he's trying to tell jokes from this joke book / mental health journal. And I think that's so interesting that they intertwine those two together. that it was his mental health journal, but it's also his joke book. Like, that's very, very interesting to look at. And then you can see here in the audience, it shows that lady, that neighbor lady of his, this kind of woman that he kind of likes, sitting there in the audience. So, and you can't really tell whether or not she's actually there, seeing him fail that epically, or if it's just in his mind. But that still had to have a very, very strong effect. If you think there's this, this woman that you like, and then you go try to perform comedy, not only is it hard enough to bomb in front of everybody, but bombing in front of her specifically would be even more of a blow to him. So then you see it again, just another one of these hits that just keeps coming. And then you see, then after that, it kind of goes into, again, what you'll find out later is actually another one of his delusions. It didn't actually happen, but it shows him walking with her. And there, there's a song playing that, some of the lyrics, they're kind of, I didn't catch quite what song it was, but the lyrics were talking about like smiling through the darkness. So he's stuck in this delusion where he believes this woman is actually showing him affection, that they're spending time together, that they're developing into something. And then the music, the theme, you see that it's this theme of finding the light through the darkness, like smiling even though there's hard times. So you see that little bit of human interaction that he got, even though it wasn't real, was just that little glimpse of light. And that really plays into it. It's where he's being kind of torn in different directions. Like, he's so used to the normal of everything being torn down, but then there's also this little glimpse of hope from human interaction, even though you find out later it's only in his head. But that, I think that also plays an important role in when he really finally does snap later on and realize things. And then there's one of the interesting things here in this scene, though, is that the woman, she sees a newspaper, and it's talking about the killings, and she says, "Fuck him. I think the guy that did it is a hero." So that's like an encouragement. It's like, oh, those were just rich bastards. Like, who gives a fuck about them? Like, the guy who shot them was a hero. So the woman in his mind who he likes has now given him an encouragement, even though she doesn't know he was the one that did it. Instead of being just Arthur, the downtrodden and the worthless, he can step into a place of being a hero. That was the first time in the movie that somebody had referred to that Joker archetype as a hero, which really, as you see the city start to riot later on, that's really what they see him as, which is very interesting. She finishes after that. She says, she encouraged him, and then she said, only 1 million more to go after that, which I also thought was very interesting, because especially when you think of this in his head, he sees the encouragement of, oh, he killed these guys, someone's told him he's a hero, and now there's only 1 million more to go. It's this, okay, the anger, the valve started to get released, but there's still a lot more pressure that needs to go in the city. It's kind of hinting on that, and you see this playing out in his unconscious mind because it's coming through in this illusion that he's stuck in. But then in this scene, he also, right after she says that, he looks out on the street and there's a cab driving by, and he immediately sees a guy in the back seat with one of those clown masks on. So it's setting the stage for like this archetype that's rising, this Joker, that it's all these little things that clicking in this illusion that are like, oh, this Joker, this clown is how I can express this chaos. This is how I can step into the role of being a hero and give the rich what they really deserve. So and then the song ends, as you hear it fading out, it's like, you'll live a life worthwhile if you just smile. Those were the last lyrics of that song as that scene's kind of fading out. So a lot of stuff in that scene that are just like these little pieces, but they're all kind of adding up and building to kind of this creation of this archetype coming out. And then we get to the scene where he's reading the letter from his mother. Logan, would you like to get into that?
Yeah. So he discovers that his mother's been writing these letters to Thomas Wayne in which she's referring to him as his son. So this actually doesn't turn out to be true, but at the time he thinks that it is. And so now he thinks Thomas Wayne, this very rich, powerful man, might be my father. that's a very big thing to swallow. And so he goes to Wayne Manor to ask some questions, I presume, but he was never allowed into the gate. He has a quick interaction with young little boy version of Bruce Wayne, and then Alfred, the butler, and they basically told him to fuck off. There's nothing here for you. Your mom's crazy. Go home. Don't come back. Basically,
Right.
and so
Yeah. I think there's a lot in that scene. So if we're stepping into the mind of his perspective, we see that he's going there thinking that not only is he Thomas Wayne's son, but that Bruce Wayne, the future Batman, is his brother. So you see this connection. Why is the Joker, throughout like the Joker Batman stuff, why is the Joker obsessed with Bruce Wayne? You see the development of this, that he thought he was his brother for a while, and he goes there expecting that. So again, he's trying to just entertain Bruce. Bruce comes up, he's like, "Oh, hey, what's your name?" He's very kind to him. He does like a magic trick with him. He tries to pull some flowers out of a wand and stuff, and he tries to entertain the kid to make him laugh. Not intending any harm or anything at all. He was just seeking answers. But then he goes there and he gets rejected, and then he finds out that his mother's delusional, that she has mental health issues, and that he was adopted. That's one of the things he finds out. Or I guess he doesn't find that out yet. Alfred doesn't tell him that. That's my bad. He finds that out a little bit later when he encounters Wayne again in another scene. But this is the beginning of him finding out that his mother's actually mentally ill, and what she's been telling him his whole life isn't really the truth, and that she was hiding this big thing from him, but it's not really true. And it's putting him in a state of just such confusion that he just doesn't even really know what's going on. But again, that state of confusion is coming with this rejection of saying, "Oh, there's nothing here for you. Your mother was just crazy. Like you're just pretty much trash. Go away," kind of thing. So again, that's just another one of those punches adding to the mental illness. And then in the next scene, we see that he's coming home, and there's like ambulances there and everything, and that his mother was being rushed to the hospital because she had a stroke. And then at the hospital, you see him outside smoking, and a couple detectives approach him to ask him about the murders on the subway. And he finds out that the detectives were at his house questioning his mother. That's what caused her stroke, because they're on his trail for the murders. They pretty much know it was him. So he's now seeing like his mother's now getting sick, and he might be going to jail for murder. So like everything is just really starting to unravel very rapidly at this point in the movie. It really starts to pick up a lot of momentum here.
It's almost like a house of cards. The entrance trying to lie and divert his way through, and everything's just getting a little bit more and more treacherous. Yeah. So then he's in the hospital room with his mother, and he sees himself on TV. He's appearing, his clip made it on the Maury show. So at first he's really excited because he sees himself on Maury, and who he really looks up to. But then as he's watching, he starts to get really angry because they're basically just making fun of him. It's not a display of talent, but rather a sort of a gag reel type of content that they're all sort of roasting him. And obviously that doesn't sit well with him, and that's going to just kind of get locked away and saved for later as well.
Yeah. Well, so, he Murray even says, like he makes a pun like, "Oh, check out this Joker," which is very, that comes into play later. And then he also says something here that you should have listened to your mother, because in the real he's telling a joke, and his mother said he'd never become or nobody's laughing, or he'd never be committed. And Murray says, "Oh, you should have listened to your mother," but he just found out his mother is delusional and lying to him, and like, so it's just that pun that it's all building up one little thing at a time.
Yeah, and you can kind of think of it like, imagine what that would do to a man if he believed that comedy was his purpose, sort of his own orlog, so to speak. He's seeing that crumbling away. Lack of support from his mother, but then he actually goes and does it, and then he's getting not appreciated but ridiculed and mocked for it. Like
Yeah.
that's definitely going to push a man even closer to the edge.
Mm-hmm.
So at this time, you see the rioting has really started to take hold in the city on a much bigger scale. It's making the news, and there's all these people donning the clown mask and holding on to signs that say things like "kill the rich." So it's very much this sort of class warfare that's breaking out, very reminiscent of like the Occupy movements with the whole, the 1% and rich versus poor dynamic, which really is a very kind of, in my opinion, surface level paradigm to look at that. It's just the rich versus the poor, and that's where all the problems and all the control is stemming from. That's a very small sliver of the pie in terms of what is driving the control system and what is motivating these people.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just because of the poor or because they have lesser and they want more for themselves. I mean, greed is at play, but it's not the biggest motivator for sure.
Well, yeah, and like you're saying here, you see the news popping in saying, they literally say tension is at an all-time high. Protesters like clowns are hitting the streets.
Mm-hmm.
That's happening right when Arthur is at this point of everything is starting to unravel for him. Like tension in his life is at an all-time high. So you see this relationship between Arthur and the collective consciousness of the city, and him
Mm-hmm.
really being the example or the archetype that is embodying that. So not only in his life, yeah, exactly, that correspondence again. So not only is he at a place of all-time tension, but the city is, like, things are really about to pop off.
Right, and it says, all these protesters are dressing as clowns, which again, there's that symbol representing, the standing up for people who are pushed too far. The worse things are getting in society, the more disenfranchised the lower class is going to feel, and they're going to be more encroached and therefore more likely to kind of be another version of Arthur, where they're pushed too far and then they snap, and then they're stepping into that archetypal role, hence the mask. Very interesting.
Yeah. And you hear Thomas Wayne, speaking on the radio, and he's giving a speech, and someone asked him, something about the situation, and he's like, well, what I will say is there's something wrong with those people. I'm trying to help them. They don't know it, but I'm their only hope. So you see that he's announcing his bid for wanting to, run for a political office. And he has this idea that he's their savior. These people are so worthless and powerless that they can't possibly be okay without Thomas Wayne. This very egoic, narcissistic kind of worldview that you see with this guy. So again, these people are rioting. They're pissed off at him anyway, and then he's just adding fuel to the fire, saying, "Oh, there's something wrong with those people. Like, oh, only I can help them, and I'm trying to help them, and they just don't know it." So you just see that he is an archetype. Thomas really represents that upper class or the rich. He's really the archetype in the show that embodies the elitist kind of mindset. So then in the next scene, it leads to there's this event going on, this charity event that the Wayne Foundation is holding, and riots are going on outside, and then Arthur uses that to kind of sneak around the edge, and he sneaks into the event and disguises himself as someone working there.
It's you see Arthur, he sneaks in as a disguised as a bellhop so that people think he thinks he belongs there. And it's so interesting because the scene itself begins outside, where there's total chaos breaking out. There's all these rioters wearing the clown mask and literally fighting police at the lines. And he managed to slip past and slip inside. And when he gets inside the theater, all the wealthy elites are sitting there in their tuxedos, and they're watching some quaint little movie, and they're, oh, yes. And Arthur's kind of just standing there experiencing this. And to me, the juxtaposition of the exterior and the theme there with the riots and the police, the discord, it was very striking against the inside of just very posh and calm, and everything is right.
They were unbothered by everything because they were
Unbothered,
rich.
exactly.
Yeah,
And who
exactly.
can you think for that? Well, the police, really, because they were the ones literally holding the lines. So there they are,
Yeah.
being good. They're dogs on a leash, being good order followers, and
Oh yeah,
insulating
that's great.
them from the fucking karmic backlash that's trying to cave in on them from the outside. Very,
Yeah.
very, symbolic
Yeah.
here.
Oh, that's great. I'm glad you brought that up. But yeah, and then in the bathroom scene, he confronts Thomas Wayne, and again, he's coming from the perspective of thinking Thomas really is his father. So then he's just trying to connect with this person. And then, Thomas utterly rejects him, tells him, "Oh, your mother was just crazy." Then he finds out not only was like she mentally, ill, and that had got put in a mental hospital, but that she had adopted him.
Mm-hmm.
So he finds out that he's adopted now. On top of all this, so his whole life, he finds out that everything he's believed his entire life has been nothing but a fucking lie,
Mm-hmm.
just like one big sick joke. And that really kind of comes into play. That again, it's this tension building up, and then the scene ends with Thomas, just punching him in the face really hard, and telling him that if he ever comes around his kid again, or if you ever touch my kid again, I'll fucking kill you.
Right.
Just very harsh about it and everything.
Right. I mean, like you said before, symbolically, he's been getting punched in the face, and now he's literally getting punched in the face by
Right.
someone he thinks is his own father. And it's interesting that he sort of vents to him when he's first being sort of trying to brush him off and reject him. Arthur sort of goes on a little bit of a tangent about things in general. He's mad
Mm.
at Wayne right then, but he's also mad that he's kind of lumping everybody else together. He's just like, what is wrong with you people? How about a little fucking decency? Like, he's just like,
Yeah.
you can't believe that this is how people are. And and like you said, it ends with him getting punched in the nose, and that's kind of just the final nail in the coffin of like his father, who you see the way he fantasizes about Murray. He longs for that connection, and he gets the opportunity to experience it and literally gets punched in the nose. So
Right.
the very next scene is very very sad and very powerful, I think, where you
Mm-hmm.
see him just kind of looking in the fridge. It's very dark in his apartment, and the lights bright hitting him from the inside, and he's just pulling everything else out very haphazardly, throwing it on the ground, and he literally just empties out the entire fridge and crawls inside and closes the door from the inside. Which I saw that, and I paused it, and I thought about it for a second, because I'm like, again, that womb like theme that we sort of picked out from the Dark Crystal when they go into the cave. But in this case, he's craving that motherly, divine motherly affection, that sort of enveloping, like crawling inside a womb. You're completely surrounded by that loving energy. It's dark and cool, and myself, with my experience with depression, I want to crawl into a dark hole. Like, I literally experienced that desire to just sort of crawl into a hole and disappear, because of how bad you feel.
Well, and it was cold. The fridge is cold. It's a cold.
Mm-hmm.
It's like that reflection of the coldness of the world that he's embodying there. But then the next scene leads into him going into Arkham Asylum to try to go get the records about his mother, to find out what really did happen. What was he really adopted and all that?
Mm-hmm.
And there, he's talking to the clerk there, and you can tell there's like something off with him. He's telling the clerk, like, yeah, I really lost it. I snapped on some people, and just, you can see that he's just starting to really kind of lose it. And then the clerk finds his records, and he opens them up, and he's reading through them, and then he like sees the pictures and what's in there, and is like shocked by it. And then he takes back and sees, he's like, you said you're her son, because he's trying to get his mother's records. And then the guy's like, he sees that he shouldn't give these to this guy, because something like these are this what's in there is very shocking. So he tries to tell him, oh, I can't release these without a form or whatever. Or you can try to get your mom to come down here and tries to do the clerk thing. And Arthur just reaches through and he grabs him, and there's a little bit of struggle, and then he rips him out of his hand, and then he's running through the asylum, very symbolic, running through the asylum, and then he runs down some stairs. So again, he's descending down into this unconscious mind, into the realm of the unknown, and he gets a place where he actually has a little bit of a break, and he opens up the files and he starts reading them. And not only does he find out that he was adopted, and his mother was like mentally insane, like she's schizophrenic, has narcissistic personality disorder, like, delusions of grandeur, but that she was arrested and put in the asylum because not only had she adopted him, but she had allowed her boyfriends to torture and abuse him. He was found extremely malnourished. He was found like there's a scene like where they're flashing back to his mother, like when she first came to the hospital, and her psychiatrist interviewing her, and the psychiatrist saying like, your son was found extremely malnourished, strapped to a radiator with bruises all over his body and severe head trauma. So this is where you see that he is the way he is because of horrific childhood abuse. Like extreme physical abuse, like someone strapping a little kid to a radiator, like beating the shit out of them and having like head trauma. That's why he's so skinny. So like earlier when we were talking about his mother saying, oh, you look skinny, why is that such a blow? Well, his body is literally that way. It's so malnourished because she allowed people to abuse him. Like, so he finds this out, and that's extremely, obviously extremely shocking, because, when you're a person who has went through trauma, especially like heavy childhood trauma, a lot of times there is a block that's put up in the mind as a way of kind of protecting yourself. It's kept in the unconscious. Well, as that's revealed, that's something that can just utterly shake someone. All of a sudden memories can start flooding back. All of a sudden he realizes that, oh, that my whole life was a lie. Like, this is why I am the way I am. Like, and then on top of all the other things that have been happening to him his whole life, so it's really just, you see here the fullness of how damaged this character really is and why,
Right. And then you see him leaving, and the next scene is pouring down rain, which, is very, very symbolic of those pouring down emotions that he must be feeling. And also, I believe that rain in a movie usually signifies the change of a character. And in this case, it makes sense. That was kind of that final blow in terms of, like you've been saying, he learned that his whole life was a lie, at the same time learning the truth right there.
Yeah.
So it destroyed the lie. At the same time, he actually found out who he was in a very real way, because this is the source, the cause of all of his anguish, that he's literally hasn't even felt happy his whole life. So,
and it's, that brain injury. So you see that's why he has that laughing condition, and why you're talking about earlier, how that laugh kind of got mixed up, like the wires were done wrong. Well, it's because he suffered that severe trauma. It wasn't something that was his fault. But I love that they have the next scene again, where him walking in the rain. That's very, very symbolic. You're totally on point with that. And then you see after that, the next thing, he's like sitting in this apartment, like dripping wet. And it's not his apartment. It's that neighbor lady, her apartment, and she comes around the corner, and she's very, very shocked. She's like, what are you doing here? She's like, you're Arthur. You live from down the hall, right? So you see that she doesn't recognize him. So this is the first clue that all those scenes you saw of them making love or on a date or anything like that, those weren't actually real. They were all totally in his head, and they all stemmed from the one encounter in the elevator they had, where she, in that one little thing you latched onto, created an entire like alternate reality. So then he comes into this apartment, and he's sitting there because he's thinking this is the only person that cares about him. He just needs somebody to fucking talk to. And then she's like, I just really need you to get out. Because obviously she's freaked the fuck out. He's just some creepy guy from down the hall. She's like, I have my kid in the other room. Like, please, I just need you to leave. Like, because she's very afraid, and rightfully so. Like if you were in her position, you'd probably be, most people would probably be pretty upset too. So you see that now he realizes that like all of that was in his head. So not only did he find out his mother's crazy, but he is too. So again, it's all of this just building and building.
Right. And then the very next scene, he goes to visit his mother in the hospital, and he actually smothers her with a pillow.
Hmm.
So I mean, clearly he's well beyond the point of the line where he crossed once in an act of self-defense, whereas this is
Hmm.
clearly, just cold-blooded murder, no way around that. But it's
Yeah.
his way of sort of getting closure, because think about how that would feel, all the time he spent caring for her, bathing her, and being mistreated and disrespected by her, um, and then to find that out finally.
Hmm. Yeah. And then, before he's like, before he kills his mother, he's talking to her, and he's saying, he's like, you used to tell me that, you used to tell me about my laugh that there was something wrong with me. And then he says, there isn't. That's the real me, happy. Because that's one of the things in the letter that he was read that his mother had written to Thomas. She's like, I think you would be very proud of him. Like, he's a little sad, but I don't know why. Like, he used to be so happy, and that was, and then when she's in the scene where she's talking to the shrink, and they're having that flashback when he's reading the records. She's talking about like how he was always such a happy boy.
Mm-hmm.
So he sees, that at one point he was happy, and then just very traumatic things happened to him that altered, his life very radically.
Mm-hmm.
And then he's, uh, as he's strangling his mother, suffocating her, he's saying, you know what's really funny? He's like, I used to think my life was a tragedy, and now I realize it's a fucking comedy. And he's saying this as he's holding the pillow over his mother and suffocating her. So you see this very emotionally charged scene. But after she dies, all of a sudden he looks out the window, and he's just seeing the sunlight out there. It's like this, you get this like sense of relief, like that he has almost.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and again, it's a very reminiscent of that similar kind of relief he felt in that bathroom scene after he had killed those men.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay. So there's all this rage, and every time it gets expressed, it's like pressure getting released off this valve,
Mm-hmm.
and that's essentially kind of the vibe you get with it as he's looking out the window. And then in the next scene, he goes home, and he's uh, watching that, or, or I think, or yeah, earlier was right. Whenever he was in the fridge, the reason he came out of the fridge is because he hears a phone call where he's getting invited onto the Murray show. Murray's like, no, that clip has got a lot of popularity that they showed, so they wanted to invite him on as a guest. So then he goes and he does all that, and then uh, after he kills his mother, he's going home, and he kind of starts preparing mentally for that. He's playing the
Mm-hmm.
Murray tape of someone else being on the show, and you see him kind of like walking through the room through the curtain and trying to imitate that person's,
Mm-hmm.
their body
Body
language and the
language.
way and all that. Like he's trying to figure out how to act normal, because he's just so socially awkward. So you see him
Mm-hmm.
practicing this, and you see the development of what's going to happen later starting to happen. Again, it's the kind of this alchemical process that it takes a time to fully develop to get to where it does end up going in the movie. But the more seeds are being planted here in this scene. And I think really quick, as he was getting ready, he's like, you see him in the bathroom. He's dyeing his hair green and everything, and he's kind
Mm-hmm.
of dancing. The song "That's Life" plays in the background, which is
Mm-hmm.
very interesting if you listen to the lyrics of that song. But then the movie also ends with that song as well. It
Mm-hmm.
kind of comes on again, so that's something interesting to know. And then as he's doing that, he hears his friends knock, and that's when um, the scene that Logan's getting into kind of starts to
Mm-hmm.
develop, getting a little more exciting for sure.
So the
Um,
next scene is where he's sort of getting ready, like he's actually putting on his makeup and getting ready to go on to the Murray show, and his old friends drop by from work, It's the guy who originally gave him the gun and then lied about it, and the little dwarf guy that they worked with as well. Probably the most grotesque scene, I'd say, because he just kind of, without warning, stabs the guy multiple times in the face and neck, and then just starts beating his head on the wall. I mean, it's really gruesome.
Very bloody.
Yeah, it's sickening. And then, the other guy is just like freaking the fuck out over in the corner, like, what are you
The little
doing?
midget.
Yeah, it's terrible. And he actually ends up letting him go.
Well, a few other things about that scene caught my eye as well. They asked how he's doing, and he responded with something very interesting. He's like, "I feel good. I stopped taking my medication. I feel a lot better now." Like, you see that he's starting to let go of trying to control and hold it all in. He's starting to embrace that sanity, and he feels better because of it. Yeah, so then he kills that guy, and you see that little midget's freaking out, and then he tells the midget he can go or whatever. But I think this is one of the funniest parts of the movie is that midget goes to the door and like it's locked, so he can't reach it. He has to call him over to help him, and you kind of feel bad because that guy's probably really fucking terrifying because he just watched Arthur murder their other friend. But then that's when Arthur says to him, he's like, Gary, you were one of the only ones who was ever nice to me, and he lets him go. So you see that it's not, even in that rage and that insanity, it's not this total just kill everybody kind of thing. Like, there's still he's still lucid to a certain extent. And like the guy Randall that he killed, that was the guy that gave him the gun, and then lied about it, that helped get him fired. Right. So it's that guy had something that he'd done to him. He didn't attack him for no reason, but he definitely killed him for sure. So like a very, very gruesome scene, but like I said, also I have to, like, admittedly, like that was one that kind of made me laugh a bit. Just with the midget being stuck at the door, it was funny.
Yeah, definitely a dark humor for sure.
Yeah.
So the next scene after that, you see he's descending that famous staircase that we mentioned throughout this recording. Is he's dancing down it. So not only is he going down, so it's like you say, descending, and in gravity's more in your favor when you're going down than trudging upwards. But he's dancing. So again, that very liberating. I mean, you don't dance unless you're feeling very free and in the moment. So again, depicting that freedom that he feels, immediately after the kill. And then just as he's getting towards the bottom, the two detectives that have been tailing him and trying to call him and ask him questions and stuff, see him and tell him to stop, and then he just bolts, and so that it turns into a chase scene.
I've got quite a bit on that scene. I think this is one of the most important scenes in the movie. It really is. If you pay attention, it's Rock and Roll, the part 2 that plays. So a song that's by a very controversial band. I saw when this movie came out, there's a lot of truthers freaking out over the song selection or whatever, Illuminati, but they just didn't fucking get it. You just want to get it. So this song is playing in the background, and again, this is the first time you actually see him fully as the Joker. Like, he's got this red suit on, he's got the makeup. Even if you look at the detail of his makeup, it's like a crooked smile. There's like the one kind of the blue on the one side is extended a little bit lower, almost like a teardrop. A very kind of unbalanced, like contradictory kind of makeup going on here. So you see this character, you see the green hair. So this is the first time that he's the Joker. But all of a sudden, he went from being the very awkward Arthur to a very charismatic character. He's dancing, and it's not even an awkward dance. It's very smooth. It's very charismatic. He's smoking a cigarette as he goes down. He's having a grand old fucking time. And but that's because he's become and embraced that archetype. And I'll go ahead and say it now. As I mentioned in the beginning, of this episode, this movie people either really liked it or kind of made them feel very awkward and they didn't know why. And it's because of the archetype involved in this movie is the trickster. It's Loki. And just like Loki, a lot of people, the people who understand him will think it's funny. They'll have a good time. They'll get a laugh out of it. But people who don't will really fucking hate it, and they won't know why. And that's because that trickster energy, there's no other better archetype for reflecting back the unconscious shadow of the collective society, especially that darkness, the things that they don't want to fucking look at. This is the moment in the movie when he has fully embraced that and just become it, and with that comes this charisma. It comes this state. He's entered into a magical state of being here, and as he's descending the stairs, as you said, he's descending into the embracing of that unconscious mind. He's going into the underbelly of society as this archetype, and he's having a good time with it. Meanwhile, you see those detectives up in the conscious mind at the top looking down on him, looking at the unconscious, the Joker of society, the dark side of society. And then what do? They try to chase it, and it leads into this kind of epic chase.
Very, very well said. Wow. So then, the chase ensues and they end up back on a subway. So it's almost kind of like full circle where the Joker character was born.
Yeah.
Now he's come full circle and he's, as you said, now fully become this archetype. And the authoritarian, the police, that's what that represents. The authoritarian in your psyche is trying to pinpoint that they're looking through the strangers and everybody's wearing the Joker mask. I mean, it's all definitely getting very rich at this point with all the symbolism, and ends up one of the other protesters, because it makes sense in this climate. They're all there because they're disgruntled. They're already kind of hostile. And then it begins an altercation with one of the other, randoms with the police, and he ends up getting shot and killed. And this plays a big effect later in the story as well.
Well, and I love the scene because you see that he's become this archetype, and what's he doing? He's running from the law. He no longer gives a fuck about authority. He's not going to stop and listen. He's going to run to get away. He's fully embraced that. And then on the train, you see all these other clowns, and this is where you really kind of see the charisma of this character of the Joker start. He starts to display this very smooth behavior as compared to the very awkward, edgy kind of Arthur. Like even as he's disappearing into the crowd, he starts that with one guy, and then that kind of starts that tussle where the guy gets shot, but he just grabs one of the clown masks and he just slips it on really quickly. And then when he sees that cop get shot, he slips it back off and he smiles and he just laughs and kind of dances away. And then you see him, he's smoking another cigarette. He's walking past all these other cops who are rushing by him. He's embraced this kind of chaos magic that he's so used to living within the chaos that he's learned to have a good time and to use it to his advantage. That there are these other clowns that are riding. They're also pissed off. Let them kill that cop. Let them beat him up, and then just keep going about your business. Again, he's very much embraced the kind of chaos magic, you could say, of that the Joker character really embodies.
Absolutely. So then begins kind of the beginning of the end, I guess you could say, where he arrives at the studio for the Murray show, and he's sort of backstage, and Murray comes in and has a little chat with him, and then he asks Murray, "Can you introduce me as Joker?" And he's like, "Well, what?" And then he says, "Well, that's what you called me." So if he was paying attention, he probably could have picked up on that there was some hostile energy coming through, because the way he said it was very kind of passive aggressive, so he's like, "Yeah, sure." And then if you look at the mirror, Arthur has written in lipstick, "Put on a happy face," which first of all, that's what his mother always told him. So he's kind of almost transmuting that. But to me, it really points towards suppressed emotions. no matter what you're feeling inside, just put on a happy face, like pretend everything's okay. Don't feel your authentic feelings. Definitely another aspect of some of the sickness that's playing out in
Mm-hmm.
normalized philosophy.
Well, and him asking Murray to introduce him as
He
the
said
Joker
Murray.
is Murray. That's how he calls him,
Well, he does.
Murray.
He does. Murray. Yeah,
Yeah, that's what I. But
I like it.
uh, him asking him to introduce him as the Joker, like that is a magical act. That's why on that scene with the stairs, he became charismatic all of a sudden. Whenever you can put on a mask, there's something about that you're stepping into another reality. You're stepping into
Hmm.
another state of being, and that's a
Hmm.
magical act. That's why a lot of times, say if a person moves to a whole new town, they have the chance to totally rebuild their life. No one knows who they're about or what they're from. Whatever they create, they become. And very much the same thing here. So again, he's definitely fully embraced this archetype of the trickster, the low key energy here.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
imagine what that's like for him if he's somebody so damaged that surely he feels like a prisoner in his own skin. Then
mhm,
putting on a mask and becoming someone else would feel very
very
liberating.
freeing.
Suddenly, you're not you anymore. You can be
Yep.
whoever you want. You know,
Hmm. Yeah,
good stuff.
absolutely. So then he's getting ready to come out on stage, and he's kind of like standing backstage, and he's smoking a cigarette, and you hear Murray ripping on him, just kind of like making fun of him, like, oh, let's introduce our next act, and then they like play the clip again. They rip on him some more. So he's like, yep, they just brought me here to make fun of me. You know, um, so and again, this was a point like where I really noticed like his makeup and everything. Like it's just even the way they did the makeup and his clothing and everything. And this is just so well done. They paid so much attention to detail in this
Mm.
movie. Um, but again, so he comes out. They bring him out, and when he comes out, he's very charismatic. He's no longer afraid. He's embraced that chaos. Um, so you see him dancing around. He has this uh, very dramatic kind of introduction. He comes in, he kisses the old lady doctor and like sets her back down on the chair, and they're just quite an entry. And that kind of leads into the development of this kind of long
Mhm.
extended scene that is really the climax of the movie.
Right. Yeah, it sort of starts as very small talk, chit chatty,
Hmm.
cordial, and then it comes up, the riots because he's dressed as the Joker, and so it's like, are you making a political statement? And it kind of opens up that dialogue about things that happen, and then it kind of comes out to, he admits that he's the one that killed the men on the train, and so now
Hmm.
obviously shit just got real on live television, and
Right.
the one producer is like over there like cut, and Murray just keeps going because obviously.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
and
quick
Go
thing
ahead.
here too is I noticed like one of the things that they start with here is that Murray asks him like you want to tell us a joke or whatever, and the audience cheers, like they're asking for it in his mind. So he pulls
Mhm.
out again this journal that we've been talking about, and he's going through, and it flips back to that page that we showed a screenshot of earlier. We can throw it up again here, um, where it has his jokes that it's really kind of showing his mental state, you know. Um, and then he admits the killing to the guys, and he kind of you see this Joker archetype. He starts kind of telling jokes. He's like, I'm sick of pretending uh, it's uh, it's not funny when it was, or that it didn't feel good. And Murray's like, oh,
Mhm.
he's like, yeah, you think that's funny? He's like, yeah, I do. He's like, those guys couldn't carry a tune to save their life. That's fucking funny. They literally like they were singing to him like, "Where are the clowns?" And then they got
Mhm.
shot because of it. So they can't carry a tune to save their life. Like that's fucking clever.
That's
Like
that's a very
so
good joke
you
for
see
sure.
you see this Joker really, this is who he is now. So he admits to them, and then he goes on. He's explaining like that. Um, people are just awful. He's talking about. He's like, the system will tell you all to go along with it. He's like, you decide what's right and wrong, just like
Mhm.
you decide what's funny or not. Because he is talking about
He's,
how comedy is subjective,
yes,
and then he
which
relates that to morality because he's like, you as society, you're deciding what is right and wrong, just like you decide what's funny or not. And he points at
right,
Murray, like
yeah,
he's hilarious at this point. Like, he's just funny. He's charismatic. Like
uh-huh.
he's his element there.
Right, yeah, that parallel of comedy and morality being subjective, and he says specifically, all of you, the system that knows so much, you decide what's right and wrong. I mean,
Yep.
that's very clear cut. He's pointing out the nonsensical nature of making laws and
Right.
dictating, even without the law aspect, just
Mm-hmm.
looking at what kind of societally accepted and not
Mm-hmm.
accepted or rejected is its own system of false morality, of just like,
Right.
well, this has value, but I'm just gonna not partake because it's frowned upon, or vice versa. This is completely meaningless, but I'm just going to keep doing it every year because it's just what you do.
Right. Yeah. And then there's another line following this that I think is and I know this one you picked up on too, Logan, very important. He's like, they think that we will just take it like good little girls and boys, that we won't werewolf and riot. And
Hmm.
specifically that term werewolf is
Hmm.
very interesting. It's that transformation, that alchemical process of where
Hmm.
people all of a sudden become these beasts and just
Hmm.
kind of riot. But
And
because of the conditions that are brought about, like, like you think we'll just take it like good little boys, like we won't werewolf and riot. Like the way he
mhm,
says it is just like it's
very
a
powerful,
beautiful
very
scene.
impactful.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, also think about then where the werewolf concept, where they make the transformation, is under the full moon. You know, think
Mm-hmm.
about that. That's bringing
Mm-hmm.
out the beast. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That deep emotions and that sort of the dark side of the mind.
Mm-hmm.
Also, notable that silver is what takes down the beast. Think of just from an alchemical perspective, but
Mm-hmm.
um, yeah. And then he says, if it was me lying on the sidewalk, you'd walk right over me. Everyone just yells at each other. No one is civil anymore. Nobody thinks what it's like to be the other guy. And that really hit me, because like we talked
Mm-hmm.
about before, this is a society that's completely devoid of care and empathy, the feminine.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
that's that lack of is what's driving him to become so insane.
Right. Yeah.
Hmm.
And it's, and then we get this scene, where they're talking about, he asked Murray if he wants to hear another joke, and he's like, "Oh, I don't think I want to." But then, he tells it anyway, you know, um, and I didn't write down exactly what he said. Did you get
I
his,
did.
his exact words? Okay. Would you like
Yeah.
to say that real quick?
Hmm. He says, what do you get when you cross a mentally ill loner with a society that abandons him and treats him like trash? Yeah, I mean, it just sounds like a rant, but if you
Mm-hmm.
listen to each word that he chooses, I mean, it really, what do you get when you cross? So he's saying
Mm-hmm.
this is like a formula for explosion, a
Mm-hmm.
mentally ill loner. So that was the pre-existing condition. It
Mm-hmm.
wasn't his fault. He was abused, and it literally damaged his body and his brain to the point that gave him all these mental issues. With a society, so that you put this person in a society that abandons him. So like he's fatherless. His mother lied to him, and you know um, told him lies, which she probably believed herself. And it goes on and on. The therapist that doesn't care. The
Mm-hmm.
list goes on. They've shown you all of this, and treats him like trash. What is trash? It's refuse. It's throwaway. It's something that has no value anymore.
Well, and keep in mind, right now during the city, there's like that trash protest going on. Like everybody's
Mm-hmm.
like refusing to pick up trash. So there's this garbage all over the city. So they're treating him just like this thing that you throw out and nobody fucking cares about or pays attention to. It's just
Mm,
piling up.
right, right. So you get what you fucking deserve was the
Yeah,
punchline
and
of
he
the joke.
blows his brains out.
Right, which it's notable that in the movie, you know, when he was rehearsing, you think, or he makes you think that he's going to shoot himself, because when he's practicing, he goes
Hmm.
like this. So it's kind
Hmm.
of a bit of a surprise the first time you watch it that he turns and shoots Murray instead. But you know,
Yeah,
again, you get what you deserve. It's kind of again relating to this Kali Loki sort of, you know, blowback energy that comes from, you know, like pushing people too far, not treating them
yeah,
with dignity.
yeah. I absolutely love this scene. Like when admittedly, I burst out laughing when I saw it. Like, I mean, he just like, he's like, you get what you fucking deserve, and he just blows the guy's brains out. And I mean, in the way they did it, the effects, I mean, it looked very, very well done. But you see this
Mm-hmm.
kind of point in the movie that it's almost like this kind of orgasmic point in the movie, in the sense that there's this pressure that has been built up for so long, and then
Mm-hmm.
just with that gunshot, that boom, is like that pressure was, you know, blown out, just like Murray's brains were.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and you kind of see him sit back and kind of laugh and relax, and he just kind of chuckles about it while everybody else is kind of freaking out. um,
Right.
so you see he's kind of like, he's now multiple times, like through embracing this archetype, realized that as this, every time there's some chaos that he unleashes, there's this relief that comes with it. And
And
you can see here, the city really goes crazy at this point. It's because you could see this act, if you wanted to look at it from the perspective of like chaos magic. What he did was he performed a human sacrifice in public, which is something that carries an extremely powerful charge. But then there's also that charge of the city, the riots, all these people just wanting to kind of, you know, kill the rich as it is. There, that energy is already there, and he was just the release valve through which that happened. But as it
right.
happened, that's an extremely powerful magical act. And what did it do? It immediately made him even more famous. So at first, the city was rioting because an unknown clown killed those three guys.
Mm.
So they were building his charge then as the archetype, but now they know who he is. He's not hiding. Like, he admitted to killing those guys. He's now killed the TV host in front of all of them. You know, like he's played on that charge in order to
Mm.
build up that magical charisma of that archetype. And then you see in this point in the movie, he moves into like a status of like godhood, of really being a
Mm.
god, that people actually start to venerate him at this point. Very, very interesting scene to look at here. I mean, it's just so fucking well done.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, like our you see the law of correspondence that definitely at play here, like you said. Arthur Fleck, you know, is the microcosmic depiction. He's kind of like the head of the zit, basically, that's been building pressure and festering, and he exploded. The pimple popped in his own life with his own breaking point of having his boundaries violated too many times. He snapped. You know, society created Arthur Fleck one at a time. People chose to mistreat him. You know, keyword chose.
Mhm.
They chose to treat him that way, which then created that consequence of the violent outburst. But then, sort of, he was the head of the pimple that is the whole society upheaving. And then now there's all these clowns that are just other Arthur Flecks wearing the mask.
Mhm.
And you know, you can you can kind of look at it also like the the byproduct of, like, you know, the government bombing other countries, creating terrorists as blowbacks. You know, it's this, you get what you deserve is what he says.
Mhm.
You know, like everything is going to have a ripple effect and a consequence. So, you know, yes, you have the freedom to treat people badly, but eventually it's going to boomerang. One thing I wanted to note too is that right after he kills Murray, and he gets up out of his chair and he walks down to the camera and he grabs the camera and he says, and remember, and then it cuts. But
Mhm.
it's actually zooming out of like this sort of mosaic of different TV screens showing the different clips replaying from the news and like reporters talking. It actually shows that I don't know if you noticed that, but it shows that part where it doesn't cut in one of the boxes, and you can actually hear him say, "That's life," and then he laughs. And
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was interesting because, like you said, it ties back to that song, you
Mm-hmm.
know, being kind of a theme there.
That's life. Yeah.
That's life. Yeah.
Yeah. So then we see that in the next scene, he's in a cop car. Obviously, he's under arrest, riding in the back. Um, and they're going through the city, and you see like fires burning everywhere, and people, and the clown mask riding and breaking out car windows, and robbing rich people, things like that. But you can actually see here that some of them steal an ambulance, uh, and then they hit the police car, and then another car specifically. Like when it hits the cop, you notice the one car they have, its wheels go up on the other car and literally like roll right over the cop on his side of the car and just fucking kill him. You get what you fucking deserve. So you see, you see here that the people, like, they've venerated to the point that they're actually like so willing to break the law and everything that they actually then steal an ambulance and hit a police car just to set him free. And again, it's this. You see, he's like fucked up from the wreck, like he's bleeding. Like that obviously wasn't an easy. Like he could have very much died during that, but it's through all of this chaos that like somehow he ends up perfectly all right. He ends up being freed through that chaos, even though it's a dangerous act to do so. I thought that was kind of an interesting thing to look at. But then you see them kind of pull him out of the car and set him up on the car and everything.
So yeah, like the riots are in full force. He's really representing that spearhead of this entire, just like you said, the release valve has completely been blown off and everything's just gushing out. And that, like you said, the driver pulls him out, and I thought it was very interesting how gentle they were, like careful with his body as they lifted him.
They're like venerating him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and that's that scene where you see, Thomas Wayne and his wife get killed. That's very, if you've ever, followed, as probably a lot of you are, growing up seeing Batman, you see that there's always kind of that scene of that robber, that mugger killing the family, and that creates Bruce Wayne because that's his traumatic experience.
And then some guys yelling, "You get what you deserve." So again, it's rehashing that all these other people are just like little, almost like fractals of Arthur that are branching off and kind of carrying out that same energy.
But I think it's really funny to note that we see that Bruce is now experiencing the same thing that Arthur has went through. He now doesn't have parents. He now has experienced a traumatic event, and Arthur thinking that Bruce was his brother at one time. That it's kind of just a funny irony that you can see the Joker, the character, laughing at that as we get towards the end of the movie. The psychiatrist is talking to him. You see that he's in the Arkham Asylum, and that's when the psychiatrist asks him a question, and then like, what's so funny? And then you see the scene of the Waynes getting killed, and that's when you see the Joker. He kind of, I'm skipping a little ahead here, but he just kind of laughs as he's smoking a cigarette and just says like, "You want to get it." That's because that's only a mind like that, only a mind that has understood the whole backstory of why all that would be ironic, why all that would be funny in a dark way. But he just says you want to get it. So that definitely is a very, very interesting thing to look at, and I love how they really kind of set this movie up as the development of the Joker. Like it gives you that backstory of, like, instead of him just being this insane criminal or this bad guy or whatever, you actually see that maybe there's a lot more to it. So again, this movie is all about the Loki energy, the trickster energy here. So as he's on this car, he kind of comes to, and you see that he's like a little fucked up or whatever, he's bleeding. But then he gets up on the car and people start cheering him, like they're literally venerating him like a god now. And he takes the blood and he smears the smile on, and he's back to his dancing and his normal, like this very charismatic but kind of chaotic, crazy trickster archetype. But and I think it's funny that the car he's dancing on, keep in mind that there's a dead cop in there. So he's like, it's like dancing on this dead cop. It's like dancing over the authority. They're like, oh look, you can't stop us now. That there's we're still going to smile. So and then that leads to the final scene where he's kind of, that I was talking about before, where he's kind of in the asylum and kind of having this little back and forth interview with the psychiatrist.
Right. And then, right after he says you wouldn't get it, it cuts to him walking out of the room, and you see his footsteps are leaving blood behind.
Blood print. And, exactly.
It kind of makes you wonder, did he just imagine that? Because it never gives you that resolution. You just see it, and you don't know if this is in his mind or if he actually did kill that lady.
The shrink. Yeah.
But it just, the movie ends with him walking away with the blood prints, and then he gets to the end of the corridor, and he's kind of like he's kind of dancing at the end of the hall, and then he runs from the staff who was chasing him one direction, but then they're running back the other way, and then he's chasing them. So I mean, like, it's almost kind of like into that power play of like, well, yes, they have all the power and this and that, but they're scared of us. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because we have all the power. It's like the chicken or the egg kind of thing.
Yeah, I love how they left the bloody footprints there, because that's something that you most people would just look at him walking down the hallway and totally miss that he's actually leaving like blood smears and footprints as he's walking down the hallway. So I love how they kind of left that off, and just the whole ending with like you want to get it. It does take a certain type of mind to really be able to understand this energy, to understand the trickster energy, and to get a laugh from it. Whereas a lot of people, it just really fucking disturbs them and they can't handle it. But I know for myself personally, like I said, this was one of the best movies I've seen in such a long time. It was just so absolutely rich. So, we definitely want to hear your guys' thoughts on it, or what are some things that we might have missed that maybe you guys picked up on. Make sure to leave those in the comments below, because we really like to hear your guys' feedback as well.
Right. And one thing I wanted to kind of wrap up with is this, looking at this from kind of a chicken or the egg question as well, with the I guess the mind virus or whatever it is, this pressure that was building that is represented by the Joker. It was already there, like brewing in the masses, that other people that are just like him, who are angry, poor, broken down, and downtrodden and oppressed. He was just kind of the first to go over the edge and reach his breaking point, but it sort of paved the way for everyone else to just kind of follow suit, because that's sort of almost the herd mentality of, once somebody else does something, then everyone kind of has that unspoken permission to go ahead for it. But it also kind of makes me wonder, could it be that the social engineers want us to go werewolf, to go Arthur Fleck? Because, what does a narcissist do but antagonize a person and gaslight you and push your buttons until you snap, and then you use that to justify retaliation. Like, oh, I do all this for you, and this is the thanks I get. Like, you're going to bite the hand that feeds you, and that sort of gaslighting. So it's definitely interesting to think about. I think there's reasons to think that they do kind of implant these images, this sort of like dystopian, rebellion and street gang rioting sort of thing. You see it a lot in like Jay-Z videos and Rihanna and stuff like that imagery.
Yeah, I mean, with it, I guess outside of the movie here, that could definitely be something that we could see. That's very much something they will try to push for, because that then gives them the excuse they need to inflict more of their control, enhance their power more.
Right.
But yeah, hopefully you guys really enjoyed this. Obviously this is the next one in an allegorical series, and we'll continue with some other movies. So if there's any other movies you would like to see us do breakdowns on, leave those in the comments below as well. Absolutely. But that's going to wrap up this episode. Keep in mind that we have a lot of different services and products available. You can check all those out at thewizardfactory.com. Or if you just want to donate, help us out, help us keep, doing what we do. We always appreciate that. And that option can be found as well at the website.
I wanted to mention too, for those who hadn't watched the previous episode where we announced we're now on all of the major podcasting platforms, Spotify, iTunes, and several others. So all of that is in a directory in the link down below. So check that out as well.
Right. Yeah. So thank you for tuning in. We appreciate the support. You guys, hopefully you enjoyed this as well. But until next week, be empowered, be inspired, and be encouraged.